The summer of 1984. Los Angeles was held in fear by a phantom in black, reeking of wet leather with horrible breath and rotting teeth. Adorned in all-black clothing, with the brim of a baseball cap pulled down low, he moved about in the shadows, rarely seen until it was too late. Using a wide variety of weapons, such as a handgun, knife, machete, tire iron, and even a hammer, the Night Stalker terrorized the Golden State area, burglarizing, raping, killing, and mutilating. While he cruised the streets looking for his next victim, he listened to a variety of heavy metal music: Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Billy Idol, and his favorite, AC/DC. After a 14-month reign of terror, he was finally caught, but not by one of LA's finest, but by a mob of Los Angeles citizens themselves. In today's episode, we discuss the life and crimes of the Night Stalker, now known to us as Richard Ramirez. Welcome to another episode of the Cabinet of Dr. Mystery. I am your host, Dr. Mystery.
Did you know I'm utterly insane?
Reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
I just wanted to include a quick disclaimer before we get into the episode here. Today's episode will deal with gruesome graphic subject matter and very dark material. If you're under the age of 18, you probably shouldn't listen to this. And if gruesome violence and discussions of serial killers disturbs you, feel free to check out other episodes in our archives that are a little more sensitive on the tum-tum. As always, with our gruesome and graphic episodes, we've included a link to mental health facilities that you can contact. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, we encourage you to reach out. That information is available in our bio.
A serial killer comes about by circumstances and like a recipe: poverty, drugs, child abuse. These things, contribute to a person's frustration and anger, and at some point in life, he explodes.
Born Ricardo Leyva Muñoz Ramírez, the fifth child of Mexican immigrants Mercedes and Julian Ramirez, known as Richard or Ricky, Richard Ramirez was an American serial killer, serial rapist, and burglar. His highly publicized home invasion crime spree terrorized the residents of the greater Los Angeles area, and later the residents of the San Francisco area, from June 1984 until August 1985. During his crime spree, Richard Ramirez was known by many names in the media. These names included the Valley Intruder, the Midnight Stalker, the Walk-In Killer, the Screen Door Intruder, and finally, the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez is known to have committed 16 murders, and he was convicted of killing 13 people, in addition to being suspected of 4 additional murders. Throughout his early childhood, Richard dealt with physical abuse from his father, who had an immensely intense temper. Richard's father was a former Juarez police officer who had also worked for the Santa Fe Railroad. The painstaking work required by the Santa Fe Railroad is one of the catalysts that led to Julian being increasingly abusive. In Philip Carlo's book, The Night Stalker, The Disturbing Life and Chilling Crimes of Richard Ramirez, There are multiple incidents of Julian not only beating his children, but beating himself as well. Richard had once witnessed his father beat himself bloody with a hammer. Richard reportedly sustained multiple head injuries at an early age. When Richard was 2, he was nearly killed by a dresser that fell on top of him. The story goes that there was a radio on a heavy, tall wooden dresser in his parents' bedroom that he wanted to get at so he could turn it on and listen to some music and dance. Richard had taken the drawers and opened them in a sort of makeshift staircase so that he could get to the top of the dresser. Once at the top of the dresser, as he was reaching for the radio, the dresser came falling down on top of him, almost killing him. But it split his head open, left a bloody gash, and blood was pouring everywhere, and he had to be sent to the ER, medically treated. After he was knocked unconscious again by a swing at age 5, he began experiencing epileptic seizures. According to Dr. Ronald Geschwind, a certain number of people who suffer from temporal lobe epilepsy have altered sexuality and hyper-religious feelings. Another interesting thing to note is to escape his father's abusive behavior, Richard would sleep in the local cemetery. His family members also discussed that he loved horror movies, and they would frighten him, these horror movies that he would watch. He was frightened by these horror movies, but when he went to the cemetery, he felt a sort of peace, a sort of calmness. Most people go to cemeteries or graveyards because they're creepy and spooky and they can be quote-unquote dangerous, right? But Richard would go because he just loved being at peace. He loved the calmness. He felt safe and secure in an open cemetery where he could just look at the stars and lay there in his sleeping bag. I guess there is some sort of tranquility to it when you're not being chased down by your father. In Philip Carlo's book, there's also mention about how Richard was really fast. He was a really, really fast runner, right? A lot of his classmates will say that as well in different documentaries that I've watched. They'll talk about how Richard was a really fast runner. He was a really quick guy. And to escape his father's abuse, when he was in the home with his father would lash out at him and he would just boot it. He would just take off like a little rabbit, just gone. And we'll see that come back at the later on. We'll see that when he's running for his life. We'll see that he is a physically active guy. I don't even know if physically active is the right word I'm looking for here, because he didn't take care of himself at all. We'll get into that later on as well, but he didn't take care of himself at all. It's more like he was spry. He's a skinny guy who had a lot of energy. He was a quick fellow. The Ramirez family home was not a place where you'd want to spend a lot of your time. If you were a young kid living in that situation with an abusive father, you'd want to get out of there whenever you could, just to avoid being abused. Another way Richard avoided his father's abusive behavior was hanging out with his cousin Mike Ramirez. Mike Ramirez was a Green Beret in the Vietnam War. With 2 tours of duty under his belt and 4 medals, Miguel returned home. His Green Beret platoon of 20 men had been surrounded by the Viet Cong at one point, and himself and only one other soldier had been the only ones to make it out alive. Despite this, Mike enjoyed the war, and he used it as a situation in which he could vent his anger and kill without any repercussions. According to Richard, Mike had 29 known kills. Richard and Mike would smoke marijuana together, as Mike told Richard about the torture and mutilation he had inflicted on several Vietnamese women. Mike even showed him Polaroids of him in Vietnam raping and murdering women. One of these Polaroids showed Mike smiling, holding the severed head of a woman. In Philip Carlo's book, he describes how Mike showed Richard a photograph of him forcing a woman to perform fellatio on him with a gun cocked to her head. And then later on, the woman whose severed head he's holding, that was the woman who was performing fellatio on him. Absolutely disturbing stuff. We talked about the Vietnam War previously, and I believe it was our first episode. You should go check out the archives for that. Great episode on sleep paralysis and the Vietnam War and how it's connected to individuals from the Hmong community. Great episode, you should check it out. I can only imagine what people in that war had to deal with, but to read vivid stories like this, it's absolutely frightening. Mike would share these stories, including some where he tied women to trees, raped them, and then ultimately beheaded them. With all these distorted views and values that Mike was influencing and instilling on Richard, he became intrigued and even looked up to men who committed violent acts. Mike's views merged violence and sexuality, and to Richard, this made women objects or even less human. Richard began becoming aroused at these photographs and these Polaroids that his cousin would show them, developing deep, dark sexual desires in the young boy. On one occasion, Mike told Richard, having power over life and death was a high, an incredible rush. It was godlike. You controlled who'd live and who died. You were God. When Richard was 12 years old, he was over at Mike's home during an argument between Mike and his wife. In the kitchen, as he was going for a cold beverage, he saw Mike take out his pistol and shoot his wife in the face, killing her instantly. After his aunt's death, and to continue his escape of his father's abuse, he went to live with his older sister and her husband, Roberto, who was a well-known peeping Tom. A peeping Tom, for those of you who don't know, is someone who creeps in your windows and looks in and, videotapes or voyeurs and tries to catch you changing or in the shower, etc. Just a fucking creep. Actually, I do have a little quick story of my own to interject here. So I was in Edmonton for my birthday, and when I was there, I was staying in an Airbnb, and it ended up being an Airbnb full of really awesome people, and I ended up making a bunch of friends, and we went out to this concert together, and we got drunk, and we came back to the house, and as we were back at the house, we heard a knock on the door. So we opened the door, and it's the cops. There's a couple police officers standing outside, and they were asking us if anyone had seen anybody creeping around outside of the windows. So it turns out in Edmonton, a peeping Tom going by everyone's window, and someone had caught him trying to break into their home. They were watching them change, and they were trying to break in. It just fascinates me that people need to go out and creep and peep on other people. There's no privacy. The government we'll talk about that in other episodes, my conspiracy theories about the government monitoring you. But it's a whole other thing to have someone looking in your window trying to catch you or your significant other changing or, having sex or whatever the hell a peeping Tom is going to be sitting there creeping for. Anyway, that's just a little side story, a little tidbit of my experience with, a peeping Tom. I don't know. I've never really had any experience with a peeping Tom. Maybe I have, and they've just been really, really skilled peeping Toms. Let me know. Let me know if you're a really good peeping Tom and you see my butthole from the window. cabinetofmystery@gmail.com. If you have seen my butthole in a window peeping on me, let me know. If you have photographs, I'd love it. I'd love to have some photographs of my own asshole. It's hard to get down at that angle, when you're trying to take a butthole selfie. So, if you are a voyeur, if you're Peeping Tom and you have peeped my butthole, let me know. cabinetofmystery@gmail.com. All right, anyway, let's get back to this here. How to be serious after I just talked about taking photographs of my own asshole. Roberto took Richard, who was now 13, out on his voyeur expeditions. Richard would take the peeping a little further by breaking into homes just to see if he could enter and escape undetected. Richard's late-night breaking and entering landed him in a youth camp for juvenile delinquents. Around this time, he also started experimenting with acid. And in the 9th grade, Richard dropped out of school and was arrested for the first time in 1977 for marijuana possession. Now, I don't have a whole lot of information about this, and that's fine with me. I don't really want to know another incident of Richard doing something horrendous. But in high school, it's noted that he committed his first rape. At age 15, Richard managed to get a job cleaning rooms and carrying luggage at a hotel. Despite better judgment from the management, Richard was allowed to have a universal pass for the hotel. At the Holiday Inn where he worked, he would use his employee pass key to burglarize rooms. Burglary wasn't far enough for Richard, though. He needed to fulfill his sexual fantasies and his deep, dark desires. On one occasion, he attempted to rape a woman while her husband was out of the room. While he was trying to molest the woman, the husband came in and caught him attempting to rape his wife, and he beat him to a pulp. Because the couple were out of state, and most likely because they didn't want to relive the incident, they refused to press charges against Richard. After dropping out of high school, he started using LSD, mushrooms, and peyote, and his interest with Satanism increased. At age 18, he moved to Southern California, and this would eventually become his hunting grounds. He filled his time with drugs and burglaries, and he lived in graveyards and amongst thieves and addicts. Soon after his move to California, he progressed to a cocaine addiction, which most sources say he would inject. Cocaine's cool. I mean, it was cool before everybody started cutting it with fentanyl. But holy shit, injecting cocaine? I can only imagine the serious health risks that would go with that, right? And it's said that he did suffer from hepatitis C. So I imagine that was from drug use and sharing needles or using a dirty needle, that sort of thing. In 1981, he was arrested once again in the Los Angeles area for auto theft. Richard began isolating himself from society, and his hygiene begins to drastically decline here. One thing that all of Ramirez's victims remember very vividly is his rotting teeth and his horrendous halitosis. Richard lived off of corner store sweets and snacks, and because of this, he developed terrible rotting teeth and horrendous halitosis. So again and again, we'll talk about Satanism in relation to Richard Ramirez. So I just wanted to take a minute here to address Satanism since it's going to keep coming up. In the future, we'll definitely do an episode on Satanism because it's a fantastic topic and it's very fascinating. But I feel like a lot of people they misunderstand modern Satanism, right? A lot of people will see Satanism as devil worship where you're gonna, you need a blood sacrifice or you're killing babies, and we can even talk about the satanic panic of the 80s. But for the majority of Satanists, their religion it's not reliant on worshiping an evil idol, an evil deity. Modern Satanism is more of a philosophy about community development and non-conformity. It's not the Satanism that Richard Ramirez is feeling, that the Satanism that Richard Ramirez is connected to. Richard regards Satan as a malevolent force, and the more sadistic and depraved his actions are, the more Satan will smile down on him and protect him. This idea of Satanism that Richard is experiencing or is connected to or practicing, this idea of Satanism is called reactive Satanism, or sometimes known as adolescent Satanism. This is when individuals adopt the stories of mainstream religion, and they see Satan as an evil god, such as what you would see in Christianity in the Bible, right? So these reactive Satanists, they see Satan as an evil god, but one to be worshipped rather than shunned and feared. Richard actually went out of his way to meet the Church of Satan's founder, Anton LaVey, after reading some of LaVey's works. LaVey was quoted as saying, "When I met Richard Ramirez, he was one of the nicest, most polite young men you'd ever want to meet." Before we get into these murder cases, before we start detailing his grisly murders, I think it's important to note how Richard Ramirez goes after individuals who are vulnerable or easy to dominate. His victims range from age 6 to age 82. And you'll see again and again that Richard attacks the young, the elderly, and individuals with disabilities. He also would eliminate any potential threats, such as husbands or men that he believes could overpower him, very promptly. His MO, modus operandi, was all over the place. He used a variety of weapons in his attacks, ranging from guns, knives, hammers, and tire irons. He also used different weapons and different methods to murder and mutilate his victims. And he would drive around to different areas in stolen vehicles. All of these made it very difficult for police to connect these murders, as they were all committed in different manners. A few commonalities remained. In these cases, the commonalities were his burglarizing of the homes, shooting the husband immediately upon entering the premises, and sexually assaulting the wife. In addition, he began drawing pentagrams or leaving satanic graffiti at the scene. With his victims ranging in such drastic age, 6 to 82, it's clear that he didn't discriminate when it came to who he would kill: men, women, or even children. Richard Ramirez was a chaotic being who chose his targets at random. And when he broke into a home, most of the time he didn't know who would be on the other side of the door. Sometimes he would just see a woman driving by, or see a woman on the street, and he would stalk them and follow them home. But mainly he would choose his targets at random, targeting whoever was the easiest prey and whoever was in his path when his violent sexual urges and impulses took over.
He needed to associate gruesome violence with sex in order to be completely satisfied. He also told me that he had to violently fantasize about his victims before he could go away sexually gratified.
In 2009, investigators linked Ramirez's DNA to the crime scene where 9-year-old May Linda Leung was beaten, raped, stabbed, and hung from a pipe in a hotel in San Francisco's Tenderloin in April 1984. This incident had occurred 2 months before any of Ramirez's previously known murders, and until 2009, he was not linked to this crime in any way. May had wandered away from her 8-year-old brother to look for a lost dollar bill. When her brother found her again, her body was hanging over a pipe in the basement of the apartment building at 756 O'Farrell Street. Richard lived nearby at the time, either at 373 Ellis Street or 56 Mason Street, and this crime, as I said, was previously unsolved and not linked to Ramirez. On June 28, 1984, the first known victim of Richard Ramirez would be attacked. 79-year-old Jenny Vincow was found brutally murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. Jenny had been stabbed repeatedly while asleep in her bed, and her throat was slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. It said in Philip Carlo's book that Richard broke into the home and he was extremely upset and enraged that there weren't enough valuables in the home, and he felt maybe that he had wasted his time, or he just felt annoyed. He felt enraged. He didn't get what he wanted. Ramirez's fingerprint was found on a mesh screen he removed to gain access through an open window into Jenny Vincow's home. 6 months after Jenny Vincow's murder, Ramirez was arrested for car theft and sentenced to 36 days in prison. Inside prison, he met a fellow inmate who also was connected to Satanism, and this fueled his desire to kill again. On March 17, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead, California, shooting her in the face with a .22 caliber handgun after she pulled into her garage. This woman has to be the luckiest woman that I've ever come across while reading a true crime story. Maria survived when the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself in front of her face. Inside the house, her roommate, Dale Yoshi Okazaki, who heard the gunshot and ducked behind a counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. Ramirez stood and waited for Dale's curiosity to take over, and when she raised her head again, he shot her once in the forehead, killing her instantly. Some people have mentioned that Ramirez was stealthy, that he had been trained by his cousin Mike. One thing that he really did was he waited for the perfect opportunity. Sometimes he would just stand there in the dark, watching people sleep, waiting for them to pop their head up above the counter, and when they did, or when they opened their eyes, then he would strike. Terrifying to be sleeping or to be in your home and someone breaks in and you wake up and you open your eyes and there's a guy standing above you, and then he just shoots you in the head or starts hacking you up with something. At the Hernandez home, Richard had left behind a dark baseball cap with the lightning bolt logo of his favorite band, AC/DC, on the front. Within an hour of the Rosemead home invasion, Ramirez pulled 30-year-old Tsai Lian Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park, California, shooting her twice with a .22 caliber handgun and fleeing the scene. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. These two murders and an attempted third, remember Maria was extremely lucky, the bullet ricocheted off her keys. These murders happening in a single day attracted immense coverage from the media, and this is when they dubbed the attacker as the walk-in killer and the Valley Intruder. Richard was described by Maria. Maria described Richard as a curly-haired, bulging-eyed, wide-spaced, and rotting-teethed man. On March 27, 1985, Ramirez entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier in Whittier, California, at approximately 2 a.m. Upon entering, he killed the sleeping Vincent Charles Zazara, age 64, with a gunshot to the head, again from a .22 caliber handgun. Zazara's wife, Maxine, aged 44, was awakened by the gunshot, and Ramirez beat her and bound her hands while demanding to know where her valuables were. While he ransacked the room, Maxine escaped her bonds and retrieved a shotgun from under the bed. Maxine aimed the shotgun dead at Ramirez's chest and pulled the trigger. Click. Unfortunately for Maxine, the shotgun was not loaded. The night before, her grandchildren had come over to the home, and her husband Vincent, being a safe gun owner and a responsible grandfather, took the bullets out of the gun. Infuriated, Ramirez shot her 3 times with a .22, then fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen. He mutilated her body by stabbing her multiple times. Then he gouged out her eyes, placing them in a jewelry box, which he left with. The autopsy later determined that the mutilations were post-mortem. At this location, Ramirez left footprints from a pair of Avia sneakers in the flower beds, which police photographed and cast. This, along with the baseball cap and the fingerprint, were virtually the only evidence that the police had. Later, bullets found at the scene were matched to those found at previous attacks, and the police realized a serial killer was at large. On May 14, 1985, Ramirez returned to Monterey Park and entered the home of Bill Doy, 66, and his disabled wife, Lillian, who was 10 years younger. Surprising Bill in his bedroom, Ramirez shot him in the face with a .22 automatic pistol, as Bill went for his own handgun. After beating the mortally wounded man unconscious, Richard entered Lillian's bedroom. He bound her with thumb cuffs, then raped her after he'd ransacked the home for valuables. Bill Doy had managed to call 911, but shortly after, he died from his injuries. Believing that he was working under the guidance and protection of Satan, Ramirez continued a bloody rampage of sexual assault, burglary, and murder throughout Southern California and eventually San Francisco. Because he was breaking into homes, attacking and killing indiscriminately, it meant that anyone was at risk of being attacked by the Night Stalker. The entire city of Los Angeles was terrified. Citizens were locking their doors and windows, and the city saw an increase in security system purchases. On May 29, 1985, Ramirez, driving a stolen car, drove to Monrovia, California, and entered the house of Mabel Ma Bell, age 83, and her disabled sister, Florence Nettie Lang, age 81. Finding a hammer in the kitchen, he bludgeoned and bound Lang in her bedroom. Afterwards, Ma Bell was shocked with an electrical cord from a lamp after being bludgeoned and tied up. I think that this homemade electrical torture device is something that he learned from his cousin Mike, because I've heard of this technique being used in military interrogations, and I imagine that this is something that Richard would have learned from Mike. With Ramirez's MO constantly changing, it convoluted the connection between the cases. In addition to that, an appalling lack of communication between Southern California police also allowed him to continue killing. The ever-increasing media attention gave Richard fuel, and he increased the frequency of his attacks, committing 3 attacks in July alone. On July 5, 1985, Richard broke into a home in Sierra Madre, California, and bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron as she slept in her bedroom. After failing to find a knife in the kitchen, Ramirez attempted to strangle the girl with a telephone cord. He was startled to see electrical sparks emanating from the cord, and when his victim began to breathe, he fled the house believing that Jesus Christ had intervened and saved the woman. The 16-year-old woman survived the savage beating, although 478 stitches were required to close the lacerations on her scalp. 2 days later, on July 7th, 1985, Ramirez burglarized the home of Joyce Lucille Nelson, 61, in Monterey Park. He found her asleep on the living room couch, and he beat her to death using his fists and his feet. Ramirez stomped on the 61-year-old's face so hard that a shoe print from his Avia sneakers were left imprinted on her face. After cruising through other neighborhoods, he returned to Monterey Park and chose the home of Sophie Dickman, age 63. Ramirez handcuffed Dickman at gunpoint, attempted to rape her, and stole her jewelry. When she swore to him that he had taken everything of value, he told her to swear on Satan. So it's not entirely clear why he didn't rape this woman. He attempted to rape her. I don't know if he was having problems with erectile dysfunction, or if, that Jesus Christ electrical spark revelation really did him in. On July 20th, 1985, Ramirez purchased a machete before taking a stolen Toyota to Glendale, California. In Glendale, he chose the home of Lila Needing, age 66, and her husband, Maxon, age 68. He broke into the sleeping couple's home and burst into their bedroom, hacking them with a machete, then killing them with shots to the head from a .22 caliber handgun. After this, he further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house of any valuables. After quickly fencing the stolen items from the Needing residence, Ramirez drove to Sun Valley. At approximately 4:15 a.m., he broke into the home of the Kovananth family. He shot Shainarong while he was sleeping in the head with a .25 caliber handgun, killing him instantly. Then he repeatedly raped and beat Somkid Kovananth, and he bound the couple's terrified 8-year-old son before dragging Somkid around the house to reveal the location of any valuable items which he later took. During his assault, he demanded that she swear on Satan that she was not hiding any more money or valuables from him. The next month, on August 6, 1985, Ramirez drove to Northridge, California, and broke into the home of Chris and Virginia Peterson. He crept into their bedroom, startling Virginia, who is age 27, and shot her in the face with a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. He then shot Chris in the neck and attempted to flee. Chris fought back, while also avoiding being hit by 2 more shots during the struggle. Ramirez eventually managed to escape, and the couple survived their injuries. Man, Chris is a fucking badass. You imagine being in your home, you're shot in the neck, and you still get up and fucking fight this guy off. Badass, man. Chris Peterson. You're a fucking legend. 2 days later, on August 8th, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Diamond Bar, California, and chose the home of Sakina Abuwath, age 27, and her husband, Elias Abuwath, age 31. Around 2:30 a.m., he entered the home and went into the master bedroom. He instantly killed the sleeping Elias with a shot to the head from a .25 caliber handgun. He then handcuffed and beat Sakina while forcing her to reveal the locations of the family's jewelry and any other valuables, and then he brutally and repeatedly raped her. Again, he repeatedly demanded that she swear on Satan that she would not scream during his assaults. When the couple's 3-year-old son entered the bedroom, Ramirez tied the child up and then again raped Sakina. After leaving the home, Sakina untied her son and sent him to the neighbors for help. We'll see again and again that Richard leaves survivors on occasion. When he shoots someone who survives, right, he shoots someone in the face or he shoots someone in the neck and they survive, it's because he's using such a small caliber pistol. You know, Richard leaves a lot of survivors because he doesn't care about getting caught. He wants everyone to spread his story, and he wants to become the scariest, most intimidating monster that he can, to frighten as many people as possible, to please his dark, satanic master. His whole thing is about dominating and controlling women. After he violently rapes someone and utterly destroys them, then he has dominated them. He has control over them. If people cower in fear, he leaves them because he's done the task that he came to do. Dead or not, in his mind, he has dominated and controlled these women, and in turn, he has destroyed them. He's not worried, it's clear, it's evident. He is not worried about being caught or being identified. He never wears a mask. Sometimes he wears gloves, but even when he's wearing gloves, we'll see that he takes the gloves off sometimes because he just can't help himself. He doesn't really cover up his crimes. He never buries bodies or hides bodies. Instead, he just leaves them in plain sight for everyone to see. He doesn't care. He's more interested in becoming infamous. He's more interested in causing chaos and causing destruction and being feared than he is of performing these acts, right? It's not... You see with someone like Ted Bundy, you see that they hide the bodies, right? Not always. Ted Bundy didn't always hide the bodies, but I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that would bury the bodies and hide them, besides Gacy, right? But the idea is that when you have someone like Gacy or Bundy, they will hide the bodies, whether it's hiding it out of shame or hiding it because they don't want to get caught and they want to continue for as long as they can. Richard's idea was that he wanted to cause as much chaos and destruction as he could. He wasn't concerned with hiding the bodies. He's not concerned about how long he can have his crime spree go on for. He just wants to be violent and chaotic and cause destruction. Richard had been following the increased media coverage of his crimes, and he left Los Angeles and headed to the San Francisco Bay Area. This is where we're going to leave it for today's episode. In the next episode, we'll go into further detail on his continued crime spree, and we'll also detail his life in prison, his marriage, his adoring fans, and his death.
They are desires, whereas if I didn't give in to them, I would be crushed by them. I believe in the evil in human nature. This is a wicked world, and in a wicked world, wicked people are born. I'm not going to blame society, my race, or people, or anything. It is up to the individual like myself to keep on knocking on whatever door they want to get into.
This episode is produced by Death Hotel Creative. Hosted by myself, Dr. Mystery. To view more, visit us at notwhatwesay.com, our Instagram handle at Cabinet of Mystery, or our Twitter at OpenTheCabinet. Please leave us a review if you enjoyed the show. Feel free to share the show and let us know what topics you'd like to hear in the future. You can hit us up either on the socials or at cabinetofmystery@gmail.com. Thank you so much for sharing this show with your friends and family, and for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes. And don't forget to tune into our next episode as we finish our coverage of The Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez.